part of her plan.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah, it was interesting.
All right,
we're
we're live.
live.
We are live.
Yeah.
Hey, we're online.
Hello, hello.
All right, so we're back at it. We got Aaron, we got Daniel, we got Michael, and we are here. We're happy to be here. And tonight we're gonna dive into. I'll let Aaron. So she came up with the idea. I'm gonna jump in, and Daniel's got another part of the idea. I think it's gonna be good. But what was the title of it? It was.
I was just going with grafting.
Grafting. Okay, grafting.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of grafting.
See, I even had a picture of how they graft in.
Right.
How physically, like logically, how it's done.
That is almost exactly the same picture that I had in my mind when you said the word grafting. But no, actually, I
don't know that I believe him.
So
do you believe him?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Well, so the idea that you can have a plan, and there's a particular way that you can do it, where you can take one type of plant and combine it with another type of plant, and it will grow. It's an amazing thing. I don't know exactly how it works. I do know that I've watched a couple of documentaries on it, and I'm like, that's cool. But if you ask me to do it right now, I don't know if I can do it.
Think about transplanting a person, of organs in a person. That's exactly the same thing.
All right.
Well, yeah, principle is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, let's pray and then we'll get into it.
All right. That's great.
You do it.
I'm going to pray, she says. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to share in your word, to fellowship. We ask blessings on our minds, that we will bring forth the word as you intended, not as we intended from any kind of personal agenda, but that we will just honor you with our discussion tonight. We thank you again for this opportunity. We pray for the people that are joining us online and that will watch us later. We thank you for the gift of salvation. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So grafting, the idea that you can take something and put it, attach it to something else, and it will be fed from the root of the other plant. I was mentioning with an organ, if you transplant a heart or a liver into somebody else, that heart is now being fed, it's being sustained by that body. So the question, what does this have to do with a Bible study? What are you talking about, all this science and medicine? Are we going back to planting trees and soil and things? Yes, a little bit. But the scriptures, and if you'll type them in and maybe cut and paste them later as people join, the scriptures that we're looking at today, and we'll read through them shortly. We're going to start with Micah 6, 1 through 8, Romans 11, 20 through 32, and Deuteronomy 28. Now, was that the whole of Deuteronomy 28? Or
pretty much.
We might touch on the second half of it. But
okay, toward the second half, but as we go through
the first half.
Okay. So the first half of Deuteronomy 28.
And actually, I would start as far back as 20 in Romans.
Okay.
Just so you get a little more of the idea.
A little more of the context.
Yeah,
okay.
and then Deuteronomy.
And then the key verses will be what they are.
Yeah. So, well, let's just put it there. Let's just tell them how I got to this place.
All right, go for it.
Hebrew tradition has weekly readings. Catholicism also has it. Guess where they got it from? Gee whiz. Anyway, it has weekly readings. They're called parashot. That's weekly readings, plural. Parashah is singular. And if you follow the weekly readings, you will read, in 3 years, you will read through the first 5 books 3 times. You'll finish it once every year. and then it'll take you 3 years to finish the rest of the Old Testament. Now, this version here, the Complete Jewish Bible, also has New Testament readings to match, so that you can also finish that. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 3, but definitely by 3 you've read the entire Bible. It might be 1 plus a bit, because the Old Testament runs a little longer, but you'll get the majority of it every year. Anyway, so that's always the starting point when Michael and I go, what are we going to talk about this week? Well, I don't know. What are we going to talk about this week? What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? It's like those stupid ravens sitting on the thing in Dumbo, right?
Or kids in the car.
Or kids in the car, you know.
Friday night. Where do you want to go? I don't know.
Where do you want to go? Anyway, one of my first go-tos is, what are the weekly readings?
Okay.
And so this week's weekly readings actually came from Numbers in the Torah.
Okay.
Micah, and then Romans.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
And then I put my idea out there, and then Daniel had a discussion earlier today with Deuteronomy 28 being in the mix of that, and it turns out, see how God works? It falls right in line with the rest of it. So the primary point of Micah 6 and Romans 11 and Deuteronomy 28 is do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Okay? Or there are consequences.
All right. Should we read Micah and then discuss? All
Go
right.
for it. You read Micah in your version.
I will read Micah coming out of the NIV, the International Version. The big bold heading is the Lord's case against Israel. Listen to what the Lord says. Stand up, plead my case before the mountains. Let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a case against his people. He is lodging a charge against Israel. My people, what have I done to you? How have I burdened you? Answer me. I brought you up out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered. Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?
And God answers,
He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And so, yeah, 7 and 8 is really key in that, because it asks the question about sacrifice, right?
and what does it point to? It's not that hard.
Well, you tell me.
What's that?
Right.
His sacrifice.
All right.
Firstborn, replacing all of those things.
All right.
So
All right.
he's not taking away. He's not showing. He's not yet doing away with all of those things, but he's showing that that's not what's required. That's not the important part.
Right. Right.
But he answers it very clearly. You have been told what is good, no more than to act justly, love grace, and walk in purity.
Here you go.
Humbly with your God. Yeah.
Very simple.
Okay.
And no, I mean, what's said there corresponds to what Jesus said when they approached him and asked about the Great Commission, the greatest commandments. You know, what are the greatest commandments? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Upon these two hang everything else.
Yes.
So this is basically saying the exact same thing.
Right.
Exactly.
And so you have that consistency piece. I was thinking, obedience better than sacrifice.
Yeah.
You look at 7 and 8. 7 is all about the question about the sacrifice.
Right.
You could come with all the oil and all the rams and everything else.
Even your firstborn.
Even your firstborn, right? Insufficient. Insufficient. He's
Your
shown you.
firstborn.
That's right.
Not his first.
No.
Just as a
just ding it.
historical note. Micah, he was what they call a minor prophet, but he was a prophet during the same time as Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now Isaiah was more of a nobleman. He had actually, been in the king's palace and all of this stuff. While Micah came from more lower birth, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
And so during that time, one of the indictments against Israel was that they were actually doing things for other gods that were forbidden, like causing their children to pass through the fire.
Ah, yes.
See,
Sure.
For Baal, for what is his name? And so when he says in 7, shall I give my firstborn for my transgressions, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? That was kind of still part of the indictment against them, was that they were doing this kind of things, thinking this is what it took to please him,
Right.
the Most High. And he's like, wait a minute, no. I didn't ask you to do that.
Right. Well, and so, it brings up a good point. By the way, is that Brittany?
Yep. Hey, Brittany.
How you doing? Welcome. We're talking about grafting today. I don't know if you can see the text. You should be able to see the text in the chat from the verses that we're looking at. But right now, we're looking at
Micah 6.
Looking at Micah 6, 1 through 8. So you brought up an interesting point. Historically, there was this habit of these competitions, if you will. These go ahead and make your child do X, Y, Z, walk through the fire, walk through. Are there some ways that you're seeing? Because I'm thinking about this. Are there some ways that you're seeing in the church today that we are still? It may not be specifically walking through, walking over fiery coals or walking through fire, but there's some ways that we haven't quite figured out how to abandon all that stuff, that we're looking at this idea of sacrifice more so than the verse 8, where it's really the obedience, acting justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly.
That shows up in several legalistic ways where we get so rule oriented, where we're trying to direct or manipulate God.
Right.
More so. I call it genie in the bottle mentality. We get the idea that God is a genie in the bottle, and if we rub the bottle the right way, and say the right phrases, and
I see it as an us versus them. I see it as an us versus them versus the genie in the bottle. See, I'm better than you because.
Okay. Yeah.
But
that's still that same kind of.
But I think it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I agree. I just see the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
I see the same problem, just the other side of the coin, like you said. Because I see a lot of it's still that legalism, but it goes back to 10,000 rivers of oil and tens of thousands of rams or whatever.
Right.
Well, I brought 10,000 rams.
Well, I bought 12,000.
I'm at the church every day or every week, or I go to, services and I do this and I donate that, and you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And then you get into, well, you shouldn't wear clothes like that. See what I'm wearing?
Right. Look at how humble I am. Not just being humble.
My kids go to VBS and we participate and we serve. You know, but you're right. It's also put them in this bottle and say, yeah, exactly. If I can do X, Y, and Z, then I get my prize.
Right.
And so,
vending machine God.
So, and I think in some of those cases, you know, excuse the turn of phrase, but we end up pimping the gospel and pimping the gifts for our own glorification.
Right.
And
Some
then we
people
get
say,
that Deuteronomy 28 case.
Right.
We'll get
Yeah,
there.
we'll-
I'm just tying it in
Yeah,
right here.
Absolutely.
I'm just, it's
But,
giving
you know,
it, we'll get it more, but yeah.
How many times have you heard somebody say, "Oh, well, you know, I was a boy preacher, or I was speaking in tongues since I was 2." Like, I don't think that was tongues. I think that was
gibberish.
Yeah.
Toddlerese.
That's right. But you know, and oh, by the way, I've been in places where, well, if you haven't been given the gift of tongues yet, then you haven't arrived. But that is actually not a biblical perspective.
If you're still ill, you're not praying hard enough.
Right. Because specific with tongues, the Bible says some.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Some have the gift of tongues. And oh, by the way, you ought to be using that gift the right way, not just, oh, look at the guy in the corner talking into the spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because if there's nobody to translate, it doesn't mean squat.
That's right. And I think we talked about this a couple of months ago. Just the difference between the use of the word tongues in the
and the actual gift.
Right. Because at Pentecost, Shavuot, the pouring out of the Spirit, they were speaking in other tongues, in each other's tongues. They could understand each other.
Understandable language.
In different languages,
languages.
Not that use of tongues is
different
Aramaic,
from
Latin.
That's right.
That's
different from the spiritual tongues.
Exactly.
So that's something that's worth pointing out. And so I do think that on some level we are still trying to we've created a new version of walking through fire or whatever it is, and we're just and to that end I think we missed the point.
Yeah.
So here's a note. In harmony with other prophets, Micah proclaims God's judgment on Yehuda for failing to uphold the stipulations of the Mosaic covenant. He preaches a message of God's hatred of sin and love for his people. In chapter 6, he puts his people on trial. God puts his people on trial, declares them guilty, and assigns them punishment for destruction and exile. However, God also promises to pardon their sin in chapter 7, using their punishment as a way of purifying them and drawing them back to himself. We use the purifying of the metal, the putting the silver through the forge to pull out the impurities.
That's right.
Micah describes a coming time of peace and prosperity when the Messiah will shepherd his people and rule over the whole world in chapters 4 and 5. God promises to rescue a remnant of his people from captivity, just as he had brought them out of Egypt.
Yeah.
So all of that is in Micah, and Micah's what? 8 chapters?
Right. And we'll continue to read. You can see where the judgment for their misdeeds and their sin and the way they were acting was going to come right back and bite them.
Yeah.
And how God is, he got them on trial and he's bringing out the evidence. Okay, you got a man with unjust scales, and he starts ticking things off against them, line after line. Yep.
But we would call that discipline too.
Yeah.
This is what you did wrong.
Yeah.
This is why I know you did wrong. This is the punishment, and it's made to, and the point of the discipline is to disciple you, to make you better.
Right.
Which again is, putting you through the fire, the punishment, to hopefully become purified on the other side.
Right.
So, I mean, he's already talking about, a legal case.
Sure. Yeah.
And what was expected of us. And how we, but also the fact that, he does promise to save You know, there are going to be some. And I have a really cool graphic, and we'll use it later.
Okay.
About the grafting in and this part in general.
Right.
But I think that it's you know, I think that it's good to note that these things do really, I mean, like you say, in consistency.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about it. We talk about it in Numbers, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. You know, and then we get a list of rules.
Right.
You know, and then we fall away, and we have to keep enduring some purifying whatnots with Balaam and not Balaam, Balak, and you know, and with Gideon and with Job, and you know, all of these people have to deal with a purification of some kind. Daniel, you know, Meshach, and the other two.
Yes.
But it's all for God's glory.
Yes.
It's all to show that as angry and just, if angry and fearful God is, He's also just.
Yeah.
And then loving, in that there's a redemption plan.
Right.
It wasn't that He just stuck you out on the ledge and shoved you off with, whether we knew it or not,
right,
something underneath to catch us.
That's right.
That's like back in 8 when it says, what does He require of you to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. With one King James says to love mercy.
Yeah.
That Hebrew word. I heard one of you in one of your translations use the word grace. And see, that's it's definitely that word there is the equivalent of grace. Having grace towards others just as He's having grace toward us.
And that's something that we should actually look at here. What's the difference between grace and mercy? Some people try to use it interchangeably, and it's not.
No.
Grace is giving you what you do not deserve.
And couldn't earn.
Right. Mercy is not giving you what you do deserve.
Yeah.
So, love grace makes actually more sense. Not everybody is deserving of love in their own personal behavior.
Right.
But we're supposed to love them because they are our neighbor.
Yeah.
They are another of God's creation, just like you don't have to love the animals, but you take care of the animals and you take care of the earth because God gave those things to us to take care of.
That's good.
Versus not giving them what they do deserve. So I would think that's what we're doing now. We're not taking care of the earth like it deserves.
Well, see, like I said, that's the reason why I point that out. Because, like I said, the King James says
mercy,
to love mercy.
NIV also says mercy.
Whereas the actual word, the actual Hebrew word, is closer to grace,
right,
than it is to mercy.
Right. I think that's something to understand, though, when we're talking about that. To act justly, love grace, and walk in purity. To give give to somebody what they haven't earned.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Regardless, it's just a thing. It's a difficult concept, but it is something that should.
Well, I mean, so here's a recent example of that. I was talking with somebody, and they mentioned that they're going through tragedy, whatever, and their people that were supposed to be their friends, people that are supposed to be looking out for them, did not come to them with any kind of. They knew about it. They knew about the tragedy, but they did not have any kind of condolences or anything for that. But these are people that's supposed to be, the inner circle. And so what I said to them, I said, well, here's what you do. If tragedy, not wishing it on them, but if tragedy should befall them, you show them how to act.
Right.
You give them that, that love, that sympathy, that support that they were incapable, because maybe honestly they just don't know how to do that, because we grow, we're in a society which is so, and by the way, we're in a society which is so much about me, and it has caused us to become very insular in our thinking. By insular, I mean it's just me. It's just all about me, and so we don't know how to rightly necessarily relate to other people. We don't know what to say or not to say when tragedy befalls someone. So I think that's symptomatic of society. One thing, and you mentioned it earlier, the second part of 7, and then when you run into 8, this idea, and you pointed out rightly that points to the need for a Messiah, because he says, "Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" The fruit of my body being some kind of work, something that I can do,
something I produce,
in order to, say, well, okay, Paul used the word, the turn of phrase, work out my salvation. I can do this to work out I can do this to be pleasing to God and work my way into heaven. And if I can do that, well then guess what? There is actually no need for a Messiah. If I can do that, if that is possible, and that's the whole point of, all the mitzvot, everything is pointing us to you can't even keep the 10, much less,
the other 600.
That's right.
Except that this also points to the fact of what it'll take to do it.
That's right.
Being Messiah, being the fruit of my body,
right?
The fruit of God's body,
nice.
to take away my sin.
Right. That's
so
good.
the comment that she made is she wasn't quite clear on mercy and grace.
Okay.
All right. So grace is giving you what you do not deserve. Mercy is not giving you what you do deserve. So the epitome of grace is, in yet that we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He gave us salvation even though we were sinners. He gave us what we did not deserve, salvation. She's got it now. Mercy is when
He didn't give us judgment. The judgment,
right. Or I was just going to go with more regular day, getting 7 years for murder instead of 25. That's mercy. You do deserve 25, but I only gave you 7. That's mercy. So,
you look at Easton's Bible Dictionary, and it could be pegged to the translation. I'm not sure, but it says it just defines mercy: compassion for the miserable.
Okay.
I'm just reading what it says. I'm just reading what it says. I didn't make these words up. Its object, the object of mercy, is misery. By the atoning sacrifice of Christ, a way is open for the exercise of mercy towards the sons of men in harmony with the demands of truth and righteousness. In Christ, mercy and truth meet together. Mercy is also a Christian grace. And so, that right there, that brings up just kind of all the way from Genesis type point, which is where he talks about, the sin of my soul. The wage of sin is death. The wage of sin is death. Every sin that we commit deserves death. The sin of Adam actually demanded death, right? And how was that worked out? Ultimately, it's worked out through Christ. But actually, in that moment, it was actually worked out through some kind of an animal sacrifice. We know that because they had animal skins that were put on them.
Covering
So an animal had to die. They had separation from God, and And
the wage of sin is death. Even in the Old Testament, it meant you brought an animal. That died. Yes, absolutely.
And
covenant literally mean cut the meat. Yeah. So when they made it, they cut the animal in half, and the two parties walked between the two pieces of meat in the blood. Yeah. Blood. That's the only way. Blood.
And so the beautiful thing is, yes, our sin deserves death, but then the gift of God, that mercy of God, is eternal life through Jesus Christ. So he died so that we don't have to experience the punishment, the just rewards of our sin.
The wage.
The wage. We don't get paid for our sin.
Exactly. We didn't earn it. We don't get what we earn. So Mounce's expository dictionary.
Okay, what do you got?
It's a lot.
Okay.
Okay. In the Old Testament, to have mercy is normally coming from the word chesed. The Hebrew word chesed, which is a type of love. Okay?
Does that have anything to do with the Hasidic Jews? No, they're spelled different.
Spelled different.
Okay.
Is one of the richest, most theologically insightful terms in the Old Testament. It denotes frequently kindness, love, loyalty, and mercy. Okay? In the New Testament, it is to have mercy, feel sorry for, or have pity. It also means to atone or to make atonement for. It also means to have compassion. Okay? Those are verbs and nouns in multiple different places. For example, the first version, elio, when it's translated from Elio.
Right.
Elio?
Hold on.
He's learning Greek.
Elio, yeah.
Elio?
Elio and
Elio. Okay. So when it gets down to Elios, it means something different slightly, but again, we're talking about languages that have multiple words.
Multiple layers.
Exactly. Love has 7 different words depending on what is 7 different. Yeah, it has 7 different words depending on what kind of love we're talking about. Yeah. But it continues to go on. But Elio is mentioned 28 times by itself. Just that one is mentioned 28 times in the New Testament.
In the New Testament, okay.
Yeah. And if we were to look at Helioskomai, I don't know. That's in there twice. Elios is used 27 times. So this is very, it's very in depth.
Yeah.
So, but those are the words, according to this, that's mercy. So, or to have mercy.
Have mercy.
To have mercy. So,
there we go. So where were we?
All right,
So we were talking about. So
love, grace,
love, sin,
mercy.
We talked about grace.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Are we ready for Romans?
I think we're ready for Romans.
Okay.
Let's go to Romans.
Romans.
Now we're moving on to Romans.
Romans 11.
Romans 11.
All right. So now Paul is writing a letter.
And you said from 20?
Yeah, I think 20 was the better part. I went back a little bit because... So we're talking about, or you can even go back to 16 just because 20 is kind of in the middle.
Okay.
We're talking about the Jewish-Gentile relationship here. Okay? So now if the challah offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole loaf. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a wild olive, were grafted in among them and have become equal sharers in the rich root of the tree, then don't boast as if you were better than the original branches. However, if you do boast, remember that you are not supporting the root. The root is supporting you.
Okay.
So you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. True, but so what? They were broken off because of their lack of trust. However, you keep your place only because of your trust. You can also, trust and faith are synonymous here. You can substitute them. So don't be arrogant. On the contrary, be terrified. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he certainly won't spare you. So take a good look at God's kindness, his mercy, and his grace, and his severity. On the one hand, severity towards those who fell off, but on the other hand, God's kindness toward you, provided you maintain yourself in that kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. Moreover, the others, if they do not persist in their lack of trust, meaning they change their mind, will be grafted back in, because God is able. For if you were to cut out of what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will the natural branches be grafted back into their own tree? For brothers, I want you to understand this truth, which God formerly concealed but has now revealed, so that you won't imagine that you are more than you actually do, or you know more than you actually do. It is that stoniness, to a degree, that has come upon Israel, until the Gentile world enters its fullness, and that is in this way that all Israel will be saved. As the Tanakh, the Old Testament, says, out of Zion will come the Redeemer. He will turn away ungodliness from Yaakov, and this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. With respect to the good news, they are hated for your sake. But with respect to being chosen, they are loved for the patriarch's sake. For God's free gifts, again, mercy and grace, and his calling are irrevocable. Okay?
Yes.
The Jewish people are God's people now, forever, and always. It's irrevocable. Just as you yourselves were disobedient to God before, but have received mercy now because of Israel's disobedience, so also Israel has been disobedient now, so that by your showing them the same mercy that God has shown you, they too may now receive God's mercy. For God has shut up all mankind together in disobedience in order that he might show mercy to all. So I have a little graphic that I'm going to pull up here.
Did you figure out how to put it up there?
Well, I'm just going to show it right now, and then I'll post it into the chat later.
All right.
So I'm going to just show it now.
All right.
It came up. Yeah, there it is. All right. So what this shows is, so that they can see it first, so they understand what they're looking at. Okay. It shows the natural, a regular olive tree.
All right.
And then those that have disbelief are cut off. Okay?
Yeah.
With the remnant.
Yeah.
Okay? Those are Jewish believers that believe in Messiah. Okay? The wild branches are cut off from there and grafted in because some of them trusted, and so now they're part of God's family. Okay? But since otherwise thou also will be cut away. Yes. Where is it at? But anyway, so those wild branches, look at the color. If the wild branches don't do what they're supposed to, they'll be cut back away, and the naturals grafted back in. So I'm going to show this up here, and then I'll post it in the chat. All right? I will post it in the chat. All right. So in the cover page of this discussion, I showed how they graft branches in. And they do this with all sorts of things. Like there was actually one tree that actually was growing like 5 different types of fruit just because they could graft it in. So if your tree is strong, if your roots are strong, then what they do is they cut a slice into the tree into the branch or into the trunk of the tree, and they take a branch from whatever else at an angle. That's important because if you've ever had roses, you know to cut them at an angle too. But anyway, you stick it into so that the open wound of the tree is open to that diagonal cut of your branch, and then you tape it together, okay? And then they will meld together, sort of like the same thing that happens when we do an organ.
Sure.
Yeah. So they cut out the old one, and then they sew back in they connect all the little tubes and whatever that they needed to connect for the organ to function properly. Yeah. And then you get, hopefully for a short period of time, but anti-rejection drugs so your body doesn't
view it as a hostile,
right, as an infection. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, as it's fed by the host body, the new organ its DNA will actually slightly change as it's absorbed. Now, here's the thing that they've been doing more recently, a lot more of. We are not just compatible to each other, and some of us not so much as others. But human to human is yes, but so are pigs.
Yep, they've been trying.
They have been
pig hearts,
transfusion, or not transfusions, but transplants. Mm-hmm. They have been using pigs. They have been growing things on the backs of rats, like ears and such. Yeah. They've been growing them on the backs of rats and transplanting them, noses and such, on the back on rats. And they graft them into a human body.
First, they grafted onto the pig, the human cells, and allow the pig to develop, to grow the human cells to the plate where they can actually use them. Then they take the human cells back from the pig and graft them back onto the human. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It's getting they hitting for the chimera. They definitely want that.
But we can. But that being said, we can do stuff so we can graft. So that's what that picture is here at the very front. So what they did is they cut the tree and they slipped in a piece, and you can see it starting. It's growing, but you can see where it was done to put that in.
A friend of mine, his dad used to have a rose orchard, a rose garden, and he sold roses all over Lee County. Bouquets of roses. Every week he would take out dozens of bouquets of roses. But one of the things we had to do was go in there and make those little slits, and when we had one plant that wasn't doing well for some reason, and he wanted to uproot it, before he would uproot that plant, he would take cuttings from it to another plant, splice it, and graft it onto the other plant, and then uproot the one that wasn't doing well because something had gotten in, either disease or something had gotten into the rose bush, and it wasn't producing like it was supposed to. But he wanted that color. He wanted to keep that same color rose being produced. So he would take cuttings from it and graft it in with another different rose bush.
I'm just blown away at how smart this study group is. How do you know these things? I'm going to have to rewatch this study. Well, it'll be up for you to rewatch. Keep it up there. And you know what? It's a lifetime of experience. That's what it is. And
no, they're the smart ones. I'm just here to be the innocent.
Being modest.
He's very intelligent too, and we read lots of stuff in many different forums. But anyway, well, I like to garden, and I've looked at this, and I've looked at this scripture, and I've looked at the practicality of it, because being humans, we sometimes need that very tangible, real life, example that we can go see and touch and experience. And so when you're given that kind of example, it's not hard to go look it up.
Well, that's true, yeah.
that's how we know.
Yep, it helps you retain the knowledge.
Something that you said, I know we gotta.
She laughed at me for covering your mouth, by the way.
And I know we gotta press on because we're gonna have to wrap.
Yeah, but we're good on time.
Okay, we gotta wrap in 30 minutes from now, or a little bit.
But anyway,
But one of the things that you said that really kind of, stuck out to me was the idea of the wound. When something is cut off, there is a wound that happens.
Yes.
The tree, before this grafting process, or I should say, before the removing process, that main tree,
The host.
is wounded. And so, it's just kind of a, I just say, well, God's all powerful. Why would he be wounded? Like,
I'm sorry.
He brought us out of, he brought he brought them out of Egypt.
Look, you think about when you say wound, immediately my mind goes to he was wounded for our
transgressions.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a wound that had to take place before others the rest of the world could be grafted
How many
in.
of us think, well, let's go back to Abraham and Isaac.
Right.
What kind of wound
Yeah.
was created? What kind of trauma was created for both of them?
Yeah.
The fact that Abraham was told to put his son up there that he had wanted and prayed for 100 years
Yeah.
on this pyre, and what kind of wound for Isaac that his father did that, but that he did it, but that he laid down willingly.
Yeah.
What kind of wounds did that create? I mean, in the end, they were saved, and their faith was rewarded. Their trust was rewarded, but that still creates a wound.
Yeah.
I mean, I had my gallbladder out. Guess what? I still have a scar.
Yeah.
Even though they took out what was bad, they had to scar me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, one of the notes on here is that a lot of Gentile of Christendom wants to push is that, or inappropriately, is that don't boast as if you were better than the wild branches. The Gentiles believers calling as grafted in wild branches is not to be arrogant in their service of God, seeing it was not that they support the root, that the root supports them. It is nevertheless incumbent upon the Gentiles believers to realize that the foundations of their faith is Jewish by definition. There's also a little note in here, a little article. It says that because it calls them to be jealous. Okay, so whereas chronologically the good news was preached first to the Jew and then to all nations, the question must be asked: how can a Gentile believer present an effective witness to the Jewish people of their own Messiah if the delivery is non-Jewish and culturally stripped of its origins? Jews would never be provoked to jealousy by a non-Jewish message, and it would be seen as counterfeit, which it is still mostly today.
From a practical standpoint, a new branch gets grafted in, you can't then just get rid of the root.
Right. Right.
And I think some people are trying to do that, where they say, well, we don't have to read the Old Testament. We don't
Right.
have to know the Old Testament. We'll just get rid of the root. Okay.
And one of the pictures I just put up was another one about the grafting off and the grafting in, and it labels the roots as the patriarchs.
Right.
Okay? Humility as the wild olive branch will be more effective in provoking the Jewish people to jealousy. The humility. The Gentile believer must not be arrogant toward the Jews, that is condescending towards God's chosen people. The non-Jew needs to remember that salvation came in part because of Israel's stubbornness. Some of the branches were broken off, so that they shouldn't boast against the natural branches. Salvation is a free gift from God, and the partial hardening of Jewish hearts towards Yeshua means salvation for them, Gentile believers. So, like you were saying, though, when if you graft the peach tree onto the apple tree, which people have done, you put a peach branch onto the apple tree, the whole tree does not now become a peach tree.
No.
It's still whatever the root is, what the root's DNA says, and the root's DNA says apple tree.
Right.
Which is why true faith in Messiah is at its root and its origin Jewish. and to remove that Jewishness with replacement theology and the such, knowingly or unknowingly, because it does happen unknowingly, is automatically incorrect.
Right. You're trying to get rid of the root.
Exactly. You're trying to take over the root,
Right.
which you're never going to do because the tree was there first, not the branch.
Right.
So it's not saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying that. Please, 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 please. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is that you have to understand what came before, so that you can continue to walk.
And he said this, and I think it's in, what is it, 32. In 11:32, he said, "For God has consigned all to disobedience, that he may have mercy on all."
On all.
That he may have mercy on all. So the hardening of Israel was a part of the grand design.
Yes.
That was part of the original promise to Abraham,
right.
And that in his seed all the nations,
all of them,
would be blessed.
And how many more than numbers in the sky would it be if all the Gentile believers were added to the Jewish believers?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's what has happened too much is that the humility part of that has disappeared.
I said this at work when I be getting into some of my conversations. I told them, I said, we've been so Roman Catholicized,
yes,
that without realizing it,
yep.
without realizing how much of the understanding that we use has their roots in Roman Catholicism, and that system is, as they say, bad root, bad fruit.
Right.
Bad root, bad fruit. That's the reason why so much of as partiality amongst the believers and the downright just anti-Bible stuff has its root in a different tradition, a different tree. Right. It has a whole different. It's coming from a whole different tree.
What they did is cut their branches off the original tree and plant them, but the roots have never had the strength.
Right.
So the whole tree is just kind of weak.
They were never connected. I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah. But what's interesting is I asked somebody, when I was much younger in my faith, about, well, if you know better, then why aren't you doing as a Gentile? If you know that Yeshua is his name, if you know that the feasts are what they are, why aren't you doing them as a believer? And she said to me that it was incumbent upon me as a Jew to do those things so that I had a good witness and testimony to my brethren, which she's not wrong, but now in my maturity, I look back at and look at this and go, it's not just on the remnant.
No.
It's on the entire church. And so I was right initially in that the church should be doing certain things. Yeah. And that takes us to Deuteronomy 28. So go ahead and jump to Deuteronomy 28.
Deuteronomy 28. This is interesting. Yeah.
And this is a whole chapter of...
It's only the first... the thing that always gets me about Deuteronomy, this particular passage, is that everybody wants to grab the first 12, first 12, 14 verses.
It's much longer than that.
But those are the only one part of the chapter that they want to deal with.
Right. It has 68, 69 verses.
Right. But the remainder of the verses they don't want to deal with that.
No,
part.
Because it's all it's all the bad stuff. Right. Now here's a quick note for you. Deuteronomy is basically a Cliff Notes version of the first 4 books.
Yes.
So if you want to know what the first 4 books says in a very short period of time, just read Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, I don't suggest, time saver, yes. However, because there's a lot more other good stuff in the other stuff, but that's your Cliff Notes version of the first 4. Anyway, 28.
And that's so the name, I think, literally means the second giving of the law. I think that's like the.
You know what? I bet you I have the
Yeah.
on it. So Davarim is the Hebrew word to go with it.
Uh-huh.
Let me see if I got a thing on here. All right. The last book in Hebrew, Davarim, means words.
Okay.
These are the words.
Okay.
Yeah. Rabbinic literature subtitles this book Mishnah Torah, repetition of the Torah, of the law, of the instructions. Because it repeats many of the instructions given in the previous books. It serves as a teaching tool to pass on crucial lessons and obligations to the younger generation. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It even says it there.
going to what we just left. We just left Romans, talking about how some of the Gentile believers have a tendency to want to disregard.
They've lost their humility.
Yeah.
Yep.
Regarding the roots.
Right.
But then you have another group that want to borrow from the fruit of the roots, but not the root. They don't want the roots of it, but they want to borrow the fruit of it.
Right.
And that, like I said, I got the idea from while having a conversation with a guy, and I thought about what you told me about the strawberry plant.
Yeah.
And how you had a nice strawberry plant that was thriving and doing well, and so you gifted someone else with some cuttings from that plant.
Right.
Okay. And when they took it and transplanted it to a different type of soil, it did not thrive. In fact, it died.
Yes.
And my point to him was, because he wanted to appropriate the blessings of Deuteronomy 28.
Right.
My question to him was, well, who was Deuteronomy 28 written to?
Yeah. Who was the you?
Who is
if you fully obey?
If you,
who's
If you listen closely,
who is he talking
observing and obeying all of his mitzvot instruction, which I give you today, Adonai your God will raise you high above all the nations of the earth, and all the following blessings will be yours in abundance, if you will do what Adonai says.
Right.
Who's the you?
Yeah. So who's the you? Who you talking to? The nation.
Right.
Of Israel.
Israel.
Right. But I would say at the very least, as we said,
God's people.
Said earlier, if you're going to appropriate the blessings, well, then you got to appropriate the responsibilities too.
Right.
And don't just start with. And in fact, my this version actually has 3 as a sub-indent to 2. Here's the things I want you to do.
Yeah, mine
and we're gonna move it in.
Mine does all the way down. It does it all the way, actually.
All the way to 14.
No, it includes all the curses too.
Okay.
To say if you don't.
But you gotta start. I think you gotta start with 1. Right, that's a logical place to start.
Okay.
So, which part did you want to read out of this? How far did you want to read?
I mean, all we really need to read is
1 and
1 and
15.
2, 1
and 15,
and 15. Yeah,
1 and 2 and 15. Okay, let's do that. So
I read 1 and 2. I read 1 and 2.
You did read 1 and 2.
I read 1 and 2.
Okay.
And 15 is, but if you refuse to pay attention to what Adonai your God says, and do not observe and obey all his mitzvot and regulations which I am giving, then all the following curses will be yours in abundance.
And the thing about these curses is they go from verse 15 all the way to verse 68.
Exactly. So there's a whole lot more curses than there are blessings.
Curses than there is blessings.
Right.
But like I said, most people, they would tend to cherry pick the blessings. They want the blessings. They want to appropriate the fruit.
Right.
But when you, like with that strawberry plant, when you take it and put it into a different soil, that you're separating it from the root. See, when you take it out of the context in which it was given, you're separating it from the root and trying to attach it. Then now you're trying to graft it into something else.
Right.
That it wasn't connected to originally.
Or which isn't good.
And it may not be good for it. So the same thing that might happen, like that's where we get the idea of the prosperity preachers and things.
Right.
These days.
Yes.
Right. Or you get this idea of what I was told before. Well, you're Jewish, so you have to uphold all of these things in order to give witness. But like you said, if you want the blessings, then you're in danger of the curses too, and you've got to do the whatnots before to be entitled to said blessings. Just because you're grafted in, the root strengthens you, not you strengthen the root.
That's right.
Not the other way around.
And you have to accept. So, you know, how does a plant feed? A plant being a tree or whatever, how does it feed the branches and the leaves? Everything is pulled up through the roots and flows through everything else, and it goes out to the branches and the leaves, right? And so that thing, that substance, you know, the sunshine, the minerals, everything else, the water, it all comes from the root. And you have to accept that if you are grafted in. You have to accept all of the nutrients that come out of this. So everything that's coming out of there, it's not just, well, I just, you know, I want, you know, okay, well, I'm going to have this, shepherd's pie is not even a good example because there's little pieces that you could pick out of it. So I would say it's not like shepherd's pie, because shepherd's pie, okay, well, I'm going to eat the piece of meat and I like the piece, so I'll eat the piece, but everything else I'm going to leave. No, it's really more like a smoothie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't, it's homogenous.
You can't separate.
If you go, think about this too, especially for fall, deciduous trees, the way they survive the winter is by dropping the leaves. They shut off the supply of food and nutrition to the leaves, which then change color and fall in order that the tree survives. Okay?
Because otherwise everything would die.
Exactly.
Right.
So this is how the tree does that. It's not the branch. It's not the twig. It's the roots. The roots are still taking what they can throughout the winter, but because they don't have to feed the leaves, it's able to, it's like a bear stocking up for winter, you know? He gets all fat, you know, all summer long, and he comes out of the cave skinny in the spring because his body has consumed the fat during the slumber. You know, this is how we get through. So again, if a plant that has grafted branches on, if it gets into trouble, that graft is going to fail. It's the first thing that's going to go. Then the natural leaves are going to go. Then, okay? So again, if your faith or your trust is not what it should be, gone. And the farmer will do it, or God will do it, or the root or the tree itself will do it in order to, just the same thing, our own bodies do it. It's why you don't drink alcohol when you're cold. Okay? So it used to be that old wives' tale, you have some bourbon or whatever to warm yourself up. No, what that does is when you get, and I know this because I taught CPR first aid, but when you're having hypothermia, your body tries to bring all the keep the blood in your center, in your organs.
To protect the most
vital. To protect the organs. You can lose fingers and still survive, which is why your fingers and toes and whatnot get cold, is because your body has shut off the blood supply, literally, in order to preserve your organs. So when you drink alcohol, what happens is the alcohol itself forces your body to send that warm blood out to your fingers. So where does the cold blood now go?
To the inside.
And which freezes your organs. Okay? So it's the same. Our bodies do the same thing. When we get into trouble and we're scared of something, what do we naturally do? No, we go down into a fetal position. It's a natural reaction. We bring all the extra stuff in to protect ourselves. Well, a graft is not going to hold.
And see, my point with him was, when we as believers reach out into, for instance, the older covenant, and cherry pick particular verses and bring them in, we like I said, we've been Roman Catholicized, so that we'll reach out and pull something in, and then we try to attach it. We cut it off from the root, and now we're trying to attach it to something that doesn't have that sustainability to it, that doesn't have the...
Because the soil she put it in wasn't good.
Right, the soil wasn't good or something, and so you're trying to attach it to something that doesn't have what it needs to bring forth fruit. But yet we still expect it to bring forth fruit because we've been told that if you say it this way and you do it that way and you did that you're gonna get it that way.
Right.
When
sounded cool when somebody else said it.
Right, it sounds good. I like what a pastor friend of mine, like I said, he says, it sounds good, but it's not good in sound.
Yes, got it. I like it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
But you're right. It's not that plant can't flourish. Those blessings, that fruit. It's not that can't flourish if it gets put in the right soil, in the right surroundings, and it stays. It has good sound
and
basis.
Here was the other part of this. In the scriptures, the root system permeates from Genesis to Revelation.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so there are scriptures that are, for instance, in Deuteronomy, that have a root system that connects in the New Covenant. Mm-hmm. But you have to get to the root. You can't just stay on the surface at the fruit.
Right.
You have to go down to the root of the particular passage and get that, like I said, that eternal principle that moves through.
What's that tree called that was in Hawaii that did that?
It's like
it would go out and it would drop another root. The one that was an acre in Maui.
Oh, it's not the mangrove.
It's not a mangrove. It's something else. But as it grows out, I cannot think of it. The tree is giant.
Listen, the sequoia forest.
Yeah.
Is one big root system.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Is the largest living organism on the planet.
Single, yes. Just like some bamboo forest.
Right. It's the largest because their root system are all connected.
Yes. It's all one root.
It's all one root system.
Yep.
And see, that's the thing about our scriptures is that from Genesis to Revelation, there's one root system.
Right.
And you can connect it, but if you just pull off the fruit, or if you cut a branch off and try to take it somewhere else, more often than not, it's going to die.
Well, this tree, like I was saying, which keeps going with what you're saying, because you're saying, okay, here's your scripture in the New Testament, but it has to go down, right?
It has to go down.
So this tree sends off branches, and once it reaches a certain distance from the trunk, it sends new roots down and creates a new trunk in order to help gather more nutrition and support the branches that continue to go out. So whether you're on one side of the tree and its root, or that side of the tree and that's root, it's still the same root. Yeah. It's still the same tree. It's still the same root. It all belongs to the same place. And you can't take the fruit of one side without You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yes, you cannot separate it.
So I want to share this, and then we'll get closing comments, because I know we do have to wrap, so you can go get Victoria in a few minutes. All right, so coming out of Galatians.
Galatians
1 started. I would start at 6. My title is No Other Gospel.
That's it. No other gospel.
I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion or trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, and now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. He talks about how he got the revelation, but when I think about that, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, understanding the good news of Jesus Christ. I cannot understand it. You could try if you want to, but it will be an incomplete understanding. I don't believe you can understand the gospel of Christ without understanding all of it. Yeah. The entirety of the Bible.
Especially with what happens in removing the Old Testament.
And they hand them out at a lot of churches, a lot of chapels.
There's 2 of them right there.
They're going to hand you a book that has Psalms, Proverbs, and the New Testament. That's it. That's it. And like, that's not a Bible. This
is not a Bible.
That's a half.
Not even a half. It's a third.
That's what I was just.
It's a third.
A third.
Yeah, and so okay.
Let's look at the difference.
Right.
Let's look at the difference.
And how much knowledge and instruction?
How much is missing?
Are you going to miss out on by just saying, "Well, I'm not going to."
This is enough.
I'm not going to understand the consistency of it. I'm not going to understand so it's not just like, oh well, we're and I've heard people say this, we're under grace, so we don't need to we don't need to follow the Old Testament. We don't need to follow the 10 Commandments. It's okay. So which one of the 10 are you allowed to do? Since you're under grace and you don't have to follow, which one of the 10? Well, that you're like, I'm good with doing all of those. Is it murder?
Love God and love your neighbor.
Is it
and I tell you that, if you even think.
Yeah.
So wait, hold up.
Right.
There's not even think, not to do, think. So
if somebody is saying, well, you just don't need to understand the Old Testament, all you need to do is read the New Testament, I would say that verse 7 applies, where he says, which is really no gospel at all, because it lacks the understanding and the depth.
Well, let's go to Messiah's own words in Matthew 5:17.
Yeah.
Not a yud nor a stroke shall be abolished until all.
Yeah.
He is not returned. It's not all.
Right.
It's not all. He hasn't returned. Yeah. So
because we'll say, we'll use words like all when we talk about sin. Okay, all have sinned, but someplace else where it says all, that they didn't really mean all there.
Oh, I bet somebody said something.
Well, the other one I dislike hearing is "it is finished." You're right. That part was finished, not all.
Yes,
it's not all.
A whole lot more prophecies.
We go back to exegesis versus eisegesis.
Yeah.
What's
the context of
this? Is eisegesis, in my opinion.
I'm not even sure it's that, but okay.
I'm just saying, this is what I want out of it. This is eisegesis. I want this part out of it. I don't want the curses.
Yeah.
The 50 verses of curses. I want the 12 blessings.
Well, but the reality is, if you actually even read through the New Testament, there's a lot of
I got it.
They're even in that, so people don't even want that.
No, I got you.
Want the hard parts of that.
I got you.
So
I agree.
All right, so let's wrap. So we were talking about grafting today. We're talking about what is it? I don't know if I were to summarize, what is it to be a completed? You want to say well-rounded? Okay, so say well-rounded. What is it to be a completed believer? Do
you know that's a term that people have used for me? Being a Messianic Jew, I'm completed. I did the Jewish thing. I understand the Old Testament part of it, and then I came into the New Testament part of it. Okay. So I'm not complete as in good to go, perfect, but complete as in I'm doing the whole circle.
Okay.
I've got the whole circle in here, not just the first half or the second half. I got it all.
And so what does that make them? Okay. I'm just asking.
No,
question.
but the other term
Incomplete.
incomplete. But the other term though is because they're grafted in, whereas I'm from the root, and you're grafted in. Not that one is better than the other. Again, we're still being supported by the same root. Mm-hmm. The other so complete. I've also heard. So a lot of people call the Messianic movement, Gentiles and Jews, as refer to them as the remnant.
Okay.
God's original people and whatnot that still believe and have faith, have had the whole way through, or but that's the remnant that they refer to, or some people say. I don't know that I would ever call myself that. Just some terms other people refer to me.
All right. No, that's good.
But you're right. But you're right.
Well, you got
7,
the mic now.
No, 7 and Matthew and Deuteronomy 28, 1 and 15.
All right. So 1 minute closing words. What do you got? Final thoughts on grafting and in this particular lesson, and then I'll issue some kind of a call to action once y'all talk.
For your widows and your orphans, right?
Well, no, it's actually, I mean,
okay, so we are all branches,
okay,
and we can be removed at any point.
Okay,
natural, wild, whatnot, foreign, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
the root and the trunk is going to survive. Mm-hmm. The rest of us are expendable. Yeah. And if we choose to wrap ourselves around the fence post or the electric wire doing the wrong things, we're going to get cut off. If we don't keep our faith and our trust and our humility in God, we are going to get cut off. Yeah. Whether the root does it or whether the root itself does it or God comes along with his axe and takes us off, we're going to get chopped off. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether you're natural or not. Yeah. But if you're grafted, you're never going to disciple to a Jewish person if you do not understand the Jewish roots.
That's good. That's good. That's good. All right. What you got?
For me, it's all about the root system. Understanding that the scriptures are as one man said it, an integrated message system from Genesis to Revelation. And you have to continually reach to the root, reach to the beginning, which is God. He is the source. He is the initiator. So we always have to reach back to the source. Yeah. And instead of trying to cut off pieces to use as we see fit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Brittany said that her head is exploding. She has to let it soak in before she can respond.
All right, so what's the call to action? What's the call to action from all of this? The idea of being grafted in, the idea of being branches, the idea of this being a root system, and understanding all of it in its totality. I would say there's two things. One is in Micah, right? But what is it? What does it say there? It says,
what part?
Well, the last part of what you said is 8.
All that
Micah
you needed
8.
to know. All that you needed to know.
Micah 6 and 8.
Yes.
That's what I want.
All that you needed to know was that you're supposed to love grace, walk in humility.
Walk in humility
before you die.
And live in purity.
There you go. Right? So those are actionable things. Love God, walk humbly.
Justice.
Yes. All those things, do that. And then the other piece is, when you study, really study. Studying God's Word is not about reading some greetings or maybe one letter and taking it out of context. And if you're encouraged by that, great, awesome. But I encourage you,
That's
dig
not study.
more. That's not study. I mean, it's okay that so you did your daily reading. Maybe you'd call it a devotional. I guess you could call it a devotional.
Yeah.
But go beyond the devotional.
Dig.
And understand, like, how is this relevant? How is this consistent? How is this, your thing was universally applicable?
Yes.
All those things. So when you read, so that's the second call to action, is to make sure that when you're reading, when you're studying, that you get, you take it from a full perspective. And if there's something that you're like, oh, I was reading this verse and it really, really spoke to me, and you want us to talk about, you want us to throw it up on the screen, put it up in the chat. We'll do it. We'll do it. We will dig into it, and we'll all learn something from it. Because I just don't think that you can be complete if you're like, well, I'm only going to read Proverbs, Psalms in the New Testament. I'm only going to read the good parts.
Well, just look at what we did tonight.
Yeah.
We connected two completely different sections of the Old Testament with New Testament.
Yeah.
And you backed it up with a whole other letter to a whole other town.
Yeah.
So, it's all, like you said, it's universal. The root structure is there. You have to understand. And we dug in. We looked at other things. And like I said, Micah and Romans were part of the reading.
Yeah.
So I knew that they were most likely going to have something. They don't always, but they were most likely going to have something in context. And then Deuteronomy, which was not even part of that reading, Numbers actually was, and that still is part of it.
Yeah.
So,
like you said, an integrated message system.
there you go.
But hey, thanks for watching. Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks as always. Wisdom. Thank you. We will see you next week. By the way, this Saturday we'll put it up. We'll get the thing set up in the. We'll set it up somewhere in the house so you can take part in the
Bread making.
In the bread making, which is also Aaron's birthday bash.
We're going to make bread, and we're going to talk about dietary law, Leviticus 11.
So sometime between now and Saturday at 1 p.m.
Our time.
1 p.m. Central, go out and get you a bowl if you don't already have one. You probably already have one. Some all-purpose flour. You're going to need yeast if you're watching online. So get the Fleischmann's packets. I recommend those. That's what I make
Plenty
my pizza
enough.
with. And
Sugar, flour, sugar, salt, oil, yeast. You will already have the water.
And you will learn how to make really good bread. And if you don't have a pizza stone or something like that,
Baking sheet works just fine.
A baking sheet will work, but you can get like a lower cost baking stone from Walmart for like $10 or $11 or something like that. They're decent. They're not Pampered Chef, but they're okay. You can make pizza on them, right? It's a piece of stone that you can put in your oven. It's okay.
And I'll teach you how to braid it. We're also going to do compound butter. Anyway, there's a lot of different things that you can do with the bread. Not only, we even mentioned it, if the challah is holy. So this is what we're making, is the challah.
Yes.
So I can't cook at this time because I don't have access to a kitchen, but I'll tune in for sure. Absolutely, and I will put up the recipe so that when you do have it, you can make it, and at least you'll have seen how it gets done, so it won't be completely foreign when you do it at home.
You know what people used to do? I don't know what the facilities are like, but if you're on a base and you're TDY, you could talk to the people at the chapel because they probably have a kitchen there of some sort, so you could actually make put the loaf together and then just ask them to use their oven to bake it, and kind of bribe the chaplains with here,
I'll give you some.
Yeah, you have a slice, or I'll give you a loaf or something like that.
Yeah, but I'll teach you how to braid it and all of that. But anyway, so that's Saturday at 1. We'll set it up 1 Central Time. We'll set it up. It will be a couple of hours, which means I'll probably have to start and stop this thing or start it a couple of different times.
Yeah.
But I will have that up. I will put up it's going to be in the group in the first Friday Foundations group, which I think you're a member of, Brittany. I'll put up the recipe so that it's up there for everybody.
And if you're watching this later on and you want to do it and you're not in the group, make sure you text Erin, put her in the chat so that you can be invited.
Let me know.
It's going to be a house full of people making bread, so it's going to smell really good, and I'm probably just going to go outside and chop some trees or something. But anyway.
She likes your idea about the chapel. But anyway.
All right, so that's it. I know we got some running to do. You probably got some too. Thank you for hanging with us, and let's pray out. Father, we thank you that you sustain us, that you are our root. We just pray that you touch our hearts, that we will walk humbly and love mercy and just follow after you just with all of our hearts, so that we can just bring honor to your name, that we can lift up the community in all that we do, and ultimately that we share your love with everyone that we come in contact with. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Oh man, that's good. Good.
Let the